Welcome to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
My Skin is Coming Off in Sheets by EdwardTheCrazyman. Where do I start? For a long time I thought I was a normal kid with a normal family and normal parents. Normal. That pretty much sums it up. But ever since I started this new exercise routine, things have gone from good to bad faster than you could blink. I was always a little heavy set. My mother called it big boned, and my father tried telling me I was getting fat. I don't think I was fat, but I was definitely not happy with my size. Then I moved and got a job at a pharmaceutical firm, selling mostly diet pills. I can't tell you how many people have laughed behind my back at the irony of that when they thought I couldn't hear them. I stayed away from the stuff my company peddled, mostly because I didn't like the idea of cheating. But then I met a guy. Let's call him Derek. Well, Derek seemed charming and funny, and he genuinely seemed to enjoy spending time with me. Then one night, after taking a few too many shots at the bar, I invited him over. I didn't hear back from him after that. That was a couple of months ago. Part of me thinks it's because he finally got to see what I looked like without my clothes on. Another part of me, a louder part, screamed, "F him!" The other day I was standing in front of my mirror before work, looking at myself in my underwear, squeezing the places that protruded out just a little too much for my liking, and I decided I'd finally had enough. I wasn't going to do it for him. I was going to do this for me. So I bought a few bottles of Cavaquid, the newest and hottest diet supplement on the market, and threw them in my car. I went jogging on a nearby trail after work and popped twice the recommended dose, swallowing the little pink capsules down dry. It felt satisfying running like that. I had a few people give me funny looks as I jogged past them, no doubt snickering at my sweat-covered shirt, but F them too. This was for me. I was going to do it. I drove home that night feeling better than I had in years. This was the new me. I had this crap down pat, and I was going to look fine as wine. The stairwell up to my apartment was a little harder to traverse than normal, and I blamed it on the workout. I ate a granola bar before bed. Then I woke up the next morning. I felt different and stripped out of my PJs to examine my body in the mirror. I'd dropped at least 20 pounds. That was impossible. The skin on my body was loose, sure, but the me that was underneath was beginning to take shape. I was like a statue of a goddess, ready to burst out of the big, ugly slab of marble. With results like that, I figured I should double my double dosage and took 4 of those sweet little pills. I dropped weight like that for a couple days until I was dragging around a blanket of loose skin. But I was happy. I could finally call that surgeon my friend had recommended and get a little tuck. Yesterday I was coming home from work, taking the stairwell up to my apartment one step at a time, and slipped halfway up. I stumbled and scraped my knee through my leggings and cursed out loud. I looked over my knee on the empty stairwell for a moment and noticed my left sock was covered in blood. I pulled my leggings up and looked it over, taking off my shoe and sock. To my disgust, I found that I'd stepped right out of the sole of my own foot. The skin stayed inside of the sock, and as I moved it around, it made a schlep sound. I stepped up to my apartment and locked the door behind me, breathing hard. I stripped out of my clothes until I was completely naked and ran myself a bath, cleaning my now skinless foot with alcohol. I soaked in the bath while browsing Facebook on my phone scowling at my friend's wedding plans and my niece's photos. My fingers started to get that spongy feel to them, and I stood out of the bath, reaching for my towel to dry myself off with. I smiled at my body in the mirror as I rubbed my back and bottom dry with that little motion you use to pull the towel from side to side. I shifted the towel around to get my front side, and I heard something drop and wetly slap against the floor. I dropped the towel and turned around to find that all the skin from my shoulders to the bottom of my ass crack had slid away and formed a puddle on the floor. Since then, my arms and hand skin has fallen away into two neat little gloves. I don't even feel when it's happening at this point, but I have started to notice that my face is coming loose. I have to stop now. The phone's getting too slippery to type on. So quoth this raven. The Scissor Man by SecurityStollerteller. I first heard the story when I was 8. I was having a sleepover at my friend Matt's house, and it was getting pretty late, to which my friend suggested we go to bed. When I asked him to stay up a little longer, he replied with, "We can't. The Scissor Man will find us." "Who's the Scissor Man?" I asked curiously. "He's the ghost of the school groundskeeper who kidnaps and murders children," Matt replied wide-eyed. I raised my eyebrows in palpable fear and a trickle of morbid fascination. I wanted to know more about this. This story has apparently been circulating around my town for years, and yet for some reason, I've never heard of it before that night. Matt proceeded to tell me the story of the Scissor Man, which goes as follows. Years ago, there was a groundskeeper in our town's elementary school, whose name was long forgotten. He was a silent and scary-looking man, only speaking when he needed to scold misbehaving children. So all the children started avoiding him. He would often be seen with garden shears, cutting grass and trimming the hedges around his small home. He lived just off the school grounds in a small house. Kids would often hear the snipping of his shears long before seeing him appear. Hence the name Scissor Man was given to him. Stories started circulating about how the Scissor Man killed his wife with his shears and escaped to our small town, where he decided to lie low and escape the police. However, more sinister stories started emerging soon about the Scissor Man kidnapping and brutally murdering the school's children with his shears. At first, those were just rumors, scary stories to tell around the campfire, but soon children actually started disappearing. 1, then 2, then 10. In a small town like this one, even one disappearance was a nightmare, and since the police had no solid evidence to pinpoint a suspect, the townsfolk took it upon themselves to bring justice for the missing children. They armed themselves and marched to the Scissor Man's house, none of them having any proof, but clinging to the urban legends like moths to a flame, desperately looking for some sort of answer about the missing children, not even giving him a chance to explain himself. The mob invaded the Scissor Man's house and brutally beat him, forcing him to confess what he did to the children. He proclaimed his innocence and begged them not to kill him, but they refused to listen. They saw the shears he loved so, sitting right there on the kitchen table. It's unknown who delivered the final blow, but the story ends with the Scissor Man getting killed by his own shears, his throat snipped open, and him bleeding out on the living room floor. Years have gone by since then, and the missing children were never found, but the disappearances stopped. For a while at least. The children who went to school with the Scissor Man worked there grew up and had children of their own. And that's when the disappearances started once more. It was around that time that the townfolk realized what a terrible mistake their parents have made in murdering the wrong person. But it was too late. A new tale emerged that the ghost of the Scissor Man was still around, seeking revenge against the descendants of all those who were responsible for his death. Although the name of townsfolk responsible were well known, most of the people turned a blind eye to it. They were mortally scared for their own children, afraid that the Scissor Man would come for their child next because of what their parents did. The disappearances happened in unpredictable manners. Once a year, once every 2 years. But children would still disappear, despite the precautions of parents and schools took. A lot of the people moved out by the time I was born, and many others who stayed accepted the fact that their child might end up missing one day, if the Scissor Man so willed it. Not even 3 months after Matt told me about the story, he went missing. The last time I saw him, he was saying goodbye after school and making plans for our next sleepover on the weekend. I never saw him again. I grew up with the tale of the Scissor Man, fearing every day when returning from school that I would hear the snipping of those garden shears before the Scissor Man snatched me, or worse. And then the disappearances stopped once again for a few years. People had hoped that it was finally over. However, the lack of children going missing was only a reprieve. In time, the story remained, even as I grew up, as an urban legend. And then the disappearances started once more when I got to my adult age. It's strange how the town got accustomed to it, as if it were a completely normal thing. No one talked about it, since they felt it even mentioning the Scissor Man would bring about his presence and put one's family in danger. I stayed in town and found a relatively good job, and despite having to do a lot of overtime, I didn't complain. Life went on as normally as it could under such circumstances. And then one evening, a few months ago, I was sitting at home and flipping through TV channels when the news popped up. The screen changed to a reporter standing in front of the elementary school with a microphone in his hand. He said, "The police are saying they are a step closer to finding the notorious Scissor Man." This got my attention. I leaned forward, transfixed on the TV. I spent a portion of my teenage life obsessing over Scissor Man, trying to dig up any meager scraps of information available on him. The man on the TV continued. The serial killer, known as the Scissor Man, has been terrorizing our small town for more than 30 years. And despite the efforts of the police, he was never found. However, with the newest evidence emerging, police say it's only a matter of time before the suspect slips again and brings himself closer to being caught. I found myself gripping the armrests of the sofa with a feverish grip. Could this be it? The reign of the Scissor Man finally coming to an end? I continued listening to the man on the news. The police suspect that the murderer is inside the town and is considered to be extremely cunning. He could be hiding anywhere, even inside your homes. Make sure to lock your doors and windows whenever you leave your homes before going to bed. There was a muffled thump from my basement. I felt my heart beginning to race. I turned down the TV and perked up my ears. It was unnervingly quiet. It felt as if whatever had made that noise was aware of how loud it was and was now trying to be quiet. I stood up slowly, heart thumping in my chest. I approached the basement door and put my ear against it. I couldn't hear anything. No, there was something there, but I just couldn't tell. It was too quiet and inconsistent. I mustered the courage I had and turned the key, swinging the door open. I was met with the faces of bound and gagged children. One of the children lay motionless on the floor, his features indiscernible from the dark. Tears streamed down the other children's faces, and at their sight they whimpered even louder. I put my finger over my lips in a shh motion and said, "Don't make a sound, or there will be more snipping." I smiled and closed the door, locking them up again. I would need to be more careful not to leave traces for the police to find from now on. I glanced to the right, towards the blood-stained garden shears on the shoe stand, the same ones that my grandfather and father used before me. So quoth this raven. My darlings, I thank you kindly for coming to visit, and thank you to my authors for these lovely stories. I so do appreciate it when you come to visit me in my chateau. And special thanks to my Patreon supporters, Ermin, Darren and Jennifer, Laura, Mutant Artificial Intelligence, Tabby Cat, of course Charlotte Emerson, and of course Cortez Williams, who has just joined. Thank you so much. You guys are just so awesome. Have a wonderful evening.